How you doing today? It's me, Logan Joyce, aka Suburban Yinzer, and right now I'm down here in Farmington, PA, in Fayette County, Pennsylvania. Right behind me is Fort Necessity, and right over there you can see the British Union Jack. This is a reproduction of what Fort Necessity looked like on July 3rd, 1754. That was the day of the battle, and commanding the British forces at the Battle of Fort Necessity was Lieutenant Colonel George Washington, or in Suburban, George Washington. He was 22 years old, commanding Virginia troops and British regulars. Approximately 400 British troops here at the Battle of Fort Necessity. And as you can see behind me, there is the reconstructed fort, trying to depict, like I said, what the fort would have looked like in 1754. So a little bit of pretext, a little bit of background about this spot. Why were the British here, and what was so significant about this fort? Well, this fort was not really a stronghold for the British forces. It was not like a standing strong fort. This was a emergency fallback position for George Washington and the British forces, because the Battle of Jumonville Glen, a little bit down that way, that was basically the opening of the French and Indian War. And many Americans don't understand that the French and Indian War, the epicenter of that war, basically centered on Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on the three rivers of the Point. The British Empire and the French Empire wanted to control this region. They wanted to control this vast region of the three rivers because of transportation, control, and commerce. And so the empires converged on this region of southwestern Pennsylvania. So at the Battle of Jumonville Glen, that was basically the spark that started the French and Indian War between the British Empire and the French Empire. And ironically, George Washington was commanding the British forces at the Battle of Jumonville Glen. Sadly, George Washington wasn't in direct control, but Jumonville killed the French diplomat de Villars' brother at the Battle of Jumonville Glen. The British actually ambushed the French in that glen, and they won the little skirmish. Well, once the French found out about this at Fort Duquesne, or Fort Duquesne in English, at the Point in Pittsburgh, modern-day Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, they sent a French/Indian force of 700 French and Indian soldiers to basically come and chase the British out of their country, out of French territory. So Washington and his troops, the Virginia regulars, they had to run or retreat, strategically retreat all the way back to this fallback position at Fort Necessity. So basically, George Washington, at 22 years old, had to command his troops and order them to construct a very amateur, simple-looking structure, a defensive position, in order to defend themselves against a 700-man force of French and Indian troops. So the British had approximately a couple hundred Virginia regulars being resupplied by British regular troops. So you had a grand total of maybe 400 British soldiers here at the Battle of Fort Necessity. So what happened was, they're constructing this fort in a couple days, probably approximately June 28th, 29th, 30th, July 1st, 2nd, basically late June. Approximately at this point, we're getting close to the anniversary of the battle. So at this point right now, June 28th, 29ish, the British soldiers, Virginia and regulars, are constructing this fort at this point. So by July 2nd and July 3rd, French and Indian soldiers converge onto these tree lines. So going into July 3rd, 1754, the French and Indian forces are along this tree line. And as you can see, they have 1754 markers marking where the French and Indian forces are converging. So they're right down that tree line. Now, there are earthworks that George Washington ordered his soldiers to construct. These are the earthworks, so pretty simple. Now, mind you, side note, this is not the original area. This is not and none of this is OG. This is approximation. They're trying to use historical maps and historical depictions to be able to give the historians a little bit of analysis, just an estimation on what's going on, what's what, where's what. So this earthworks was here. Okay, this is not the original earthworks, but this was approximation of the size and the scale. So the Virginia forces and the British troops are standing or kneeling behind these earthworks. So they are in a defensive position. This is very primitive, this is very simple. And while the French and Indian soldiers are converging on that tree line out there, very close to this fort, it starts to drizzle, starts to rain. Now that's not good for the French, that's not good for the British forces, because the British forces, as you could see, are out in the open. See, they're out in this open field. There's no cover at all. There's no cover over these trenches. There's no cover over this fort, except for the structure inside the fort that houses the ammunition and the gunpowder. So in this open area, while it's drizzling and while it's raining, during the battle on July 3rd, 1754, the gunpowder in the pans of the flintlock muskets is starting to get wet. And wet powder means it's not going to fire. Wet powder does not charge and does not explode the musket ball out of the barrel to your enemy. So the French and the Indian forces in the woods, they're protected by a wooded area. See, they are protected by foliage. So they don't care. De Valera's soldiers, they are protected by the natural landscape and the natural elements outside in the woods, so the rain is not falling upon them and not wetting their gunpowder. So they have a full constant shot of fire, or line of fire, here at this fort. So they're literally picking off the British and Virginia forces here at the Battle of Fort Necessity. So after a couple hours, and after the rain starts to really pour down, British troops and Virginia troops, they are starting to get wounded and killed. It is a massacre out here. George Washington's panicking. The soldiers are losing confidence. They're losing hope during the course of the battle, which naturally you're going to lose hope while you're being picked apart. The powder's wet. Everything's in disarray. Everything's chaotic. George Washington knows in the end and in conclusion that he's going to lose this battle. He's going to lose this fight naturally. He's 22 years old. He's a very young, inexperienced soldier who has really no battle experience at all under his belt. So during the end of the battle, into the nighttime of July 3rd, they declare a surrender, a white flag truce, and they meet and they negotiate surrender terms. And so since George Washington doesn't speak French, he accidentally signs a treaty, or basically let's just say a testament or testimony, that he surrenders to the French forces, and that he is personally responsible for the murder of De Valera's brother at the Battle of Jumonville Glen, which George Washington was not responsible. He was not directly personally responsible for killing the French De Valera's brother. But in the French treaty, the French duped him and tricked him into signing that. And so now he has to take personal responsibility for De Valera's brother's murder by Jumonville on, I think, May 28th, 1754. Approximation, probably a month before this battle on July 3rd. So now George Washington and his decimated forces, decimated forces of Virginia and British troops, now they have to return, and they have to basically retreat down, going back to their country, getting away from French country, French claim country. And basically right here is the epicenter and the start and the beginning of the French and Indian War here in the United States, or the British colonies. Now the imperial forces of the British and the French are going to fight a 7 years world war, okay, all around the world. This isn't just the British. This isn't just, in Europe. This is also across the globe. These forces are going to literally go toe-to-toe and fight each other for who will control the the British colonies, or the colonies in general? Who will control this vast wilderness? Who will control this area? And at the end of the day, the British, right here, the British flag, they will be successful, they will succeed, and they will win the war, and they will control the American colonies in this Western Hemisphere. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the start. This is the start of the French and Indian War. And George Washington, our first president, one of the founders of the United States of America, was here commanding British and Virginia forces here at the Battle of Fort Necessity, July 3rd, 1754. And ironically, he signed that treaty, or that surrender term, on July 4th, 1754, decades before the signing of the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. But anyway, thank you for watching this video. Peace out and have a good day.